Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. I know Ray would be disappointed. He was looking forward to folks seeing that video. And let me offer also our current IEEE president, Kathy Land. I spoke to her yesterday. She asked me to pass along her regrets that she couldn't join us today. She's on a family vacation far from any internet access, and she's looking forward to the quiet time. I'm hoping to show you some things that I think we don't normally talk about at these meetings, to give you a look at some of the other activities, as Ed mentioned, going on around IEEE. I'll mention some things happening in education, some of the things happening in publications, just to give you a sense of other activity going on. And I hope this is useful to everyone. And I know the charts are posted. So I think I know most folks on the call. I'm Steve Welby. I'm the Executive Director of IEEE. I serve as the Chief Operating Officer of IEEE. I lead the worldwide staff and support the volunteer leadership in the overall management of the global IEEE operations. And when I think about what we do, I like to show this chart when I talk to folks about IEEE, because I think it's sometimes we don't start by talking about our mission. I think it's very important that IEEE is a mission-focused organization, and in everything we do, our purpose is fostering technological innovation and advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. And I think that's a remarkable mission. It's an enormously important piece of work that IEEE does, and we do that through a number of activities. All of our technology efforts, our technology activities, the many societies that make up IEEE are all supporting and sponsoring education and research on the frontiers of their individual fields. Our work in standards brings companies together that create billions of dollars and improve the human condition. Almost in everything we do, the work of IEEE is about building communities. We bring people together, we convene, we allow folks to do more together than they could do individually. And of course, we do that through our membership, divided and organized as geographically distributed units made up of regions and sections and local chapters, all of which allows engineers to find each other and do more together. And I said engineers, of course, and if I fall into the trap of using engineers, because I mean engineers in the broadest sense, I should be using the word technologists, computer scientists, and other technically affiliated individuals. I just want to quickly show you some numbers. As of the end of last year, IEEE had 396,000 members in 160 countries. We have 46 technical societies and councils that range from very deeply narrow technical activities in and around very specific piece of technology focused on signal processing or information theory or other areas. And then we have broad groups that are looking at, for example, engineering education or the impact of technology on society. We have 107,000 student members as the end of last year, and I think those are some of our most important places that we can influence the future. Those students are the future of our profession. They're going to shape the world after us, and the work we do with our students, I think, is enormously important. I know that either Michael Lucan or Cecilia Jankowski are speaking later. I've not included detailed charts on membership numbers because I believe that they'll cover it in their presentations. When you think about the technical breadth of IEEE, this is the numbers from last year, and I find this remarkable because this is the numbers from the COVID year. We still put on almost 2,000 conferences around the world, despite the impact of COVID. About a little bit over 100 of those were in person, largely occurred early in the year. Though we continue to have in-person conferences, not just outside the United States, but we've had meetings within the United States in the last few months with over 1,000 people successfully, with very tight public health controls, managed to avoid any kind of incident. Last year, we've crossed the 5 million technical document in our publication library. Those documents represent kind of the foundation of engineering technical knowledge. We're publishing today over 200 periodicals, and we have over 1,300 active standards in areas that range from power to communication to nuclear qualification, to new areas like ethics and artificial intelligence. And then we have an enormous social impact. Um, if Kate, when Kate gets out, she'll talk about the work that IEEE USA does in Washington on U.S. Public policy, but IEEE is engaged in influencing global public policy, whether in Washington or Brussels or Beijing. IEEE is a voice that influences the future of the way that technology is being driving public policy. We have direct global humanitarian efforts that are impacting lives around the world. A major focus of the last 2 years has been on education across IEEE, including a major focus on developing a whole new suite of low-cost or free continuing educational resources for our members. And then finally, a major focus for the last few years has been thinking about ethics and technology. Just a quick comment on the IEEE staff. We've been, I think, significantly impacted by the pandemic. We've been trying to manage the safety of our staff while supporting our members through this complex time. As of today, all of our U.S. offices are open. I'm here today. You can see Grand Central probably behind me. I'm in the Manhattan office. I rotate between the New York, Washington, D.C. and New York City offices. Our California office opened in June. Our office in Singapore is opening this week, which is great news for us. Our office in Tokyo is really open only when necessary, given the current state of emergency there. And we've managed to reopen the office in India. So all of our offices are open in some capacity. We have not brought the full staff back. Most of the staff remains working from home just to account for safety. But we are having meetings, and I'm in the office every day. For your information, I just want to point out that we are now in the IEEE annual election season. This is very important, and it helps, is an opportunity for all of our members to shape the future of IEEE. The election opened last week and runs through the 1st of October. The online digital elections are open. I think the paper ballots, for those who still receive them, go out this week. I list on the screen some of the major elections that are going on. Of course, the IEEE president-elect, and then division, region, standards association, technical activities, IEEE USA. And for the first time, the women in engineering leadership is now on the global ballot. We've elevated that so that everyone can have an opportunity to engage in that election. And what's not listed on the chart are all of the technical society elections, which are also going on. Their timing's just slightly different, and so I've included a link in the charts to the schedule. One of the major activities over the last year has been a real focus on rethinking IEEE's efforts around diversity, equity, inclusion in our professions. And I just wanted to note that one of the most recent things that we've done is post a very visible public website focused on IEEE's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. It includes resources that folks can review about not only what IEEE is doing, but broader efforts in the world. We reference, for example, some of the things that we've been engaged with the UN in global access to engineering for women. It includes the IEEE diversity statement, which the board of directors approved in 2019, and the recent overhaul of the IEEE Code of Ethics and the reporting process by which we hold each other to account for violations of that Code of Ethics was just refreshed in the last year as well. It's one thing to kind of talk about diversity and inclusion, and it's one thing to act. I was very pleased that in June, the board of directors recognized that some of our processes associated with how, for example, authors address their identity online in IEEE publications were causing certainly perceived harm to individuals. It was very difficult for one to change their name on an IEEE publication, whether because of marriage or divorce or religious conversion, change in gender alignment, or any other reason that might have triggered this, without getting permission from a long list of individuals, some of whom may have been involved or the source of the reason that you changed your name. And so the board acted to eliminate a potential harm, addressing a concern about certainly the appearance of, or a concern about IEEE not recognizing concerns about diversity and identity. And I think this is the sort of thing that I think we're now much more conscious of, and we're taking action to not just talk about this but to really engage in improving our actions in the world. I have one chart here just to warn folks about an ongoing concern with folks using IEEE for phishing attacks. The world is a complex place in cyberspace. We've seen some very sophisticated email campaigns aimed at IEEE members recently. Many of our relationships are visible on IEEE websites. The organization's structure is visible. I'll point to just one campaign which spoofed the IEEE president's email address and sent notes to others requesting that they provide emergency financial support. You should not be receiving ever emails from any other IEEE members asking for gift cards, for check writing, or anything else. And if there's a possibility of it, it's always confirm it through another channel. Unfortunately, we have had folks who've fallen for these kind of schemes. And I also encourage folks to think carefully about the current and very significant risk of ransomware. Always be careful what you click on. IEEE has a dedicated cybersecurity staff. If you have any questions about any IEEE messages, anything that comes through IEEE.org email that you're concerned about it, you can always forward it to security.IEEE.org, and we would really appreciate it, because member messages often give us early warning of large-scale attacks on our membership. In the Treasury discussion in the XCOM meeting last night, there was some discussion about the IEEE next-gen system. A major effort over the last year has been an overhaul of all of IEEE's financial policies and our finance systems. In May, we rolled out a major investment in a new financial system across IEEE. It's cloud-based, and it allows all the finances of IEEE, whether it's a geo unit in Malaysia, whether it's a conference being run in San Francisco, whether it's payroll for staff in Piscataway, New Jersey, to all be integrated into a single online system in the cloud, accessible by volunteers and staff anywhere. It provides much greater visibility and traceability into the accounts of IEEE in real time. And we're hoping that this will allow us to run IEEE more efficiently and more effectively in the future. This has been a pretty heavy lift. We've done a lot of training for volunteers and staff. And despite some, I think, initial growing pains associated with adopting any major system, we've successfully moved both historical and current accounts into this new environment, and we're now running IEEE in this system. If you are engaged with this, I appreciate your patience as we get this all in place. We were already building lists of user interface changes and some new training to make it even simpler in the future. I think that's part of, by design, we wanted to deploy this quickly and get feedback so we could adjust over time. I'm not going to go through this chart, but it lists many of the things we're trying to accomplish here in terms of reducing burden on individuals, bringing people into kind of common banking practices, regardless of where in the world they're in, allow us to operate with multiple currencies, getting us out of paper checks into electronic payments worldwide, and allowing us to provide a more real-time view of IEEE's finances. I want to quickly mention our conference activities, just to show you some numbers this year. To date, we've had 380 IEEE conferences conducted through July, and we have 522 planned through the rest of the year. These are financial conferences. These are meetings where IEEE has a financial stake. This doesn't count our technically co-sponsored conferences, which are a much larger number. But it just shows, I think, the changing mix. A few years ago, we would have had no virtual or hybrid meetings on this chart. You can see today that it's dominated by virtual and hybrid meetings. But all those hybrid meetings have an in-person component. We've conducted over 55 of those to date this year, and we have almost 100 planned going forward through the rest of the year. So our members and stakeholders are convening, and IEEE is connecting research and technologists around the world. Publications remains active in 2021. We've been growing full text downloads. That's a measure of how many people are accessing IEEE technical content. And we've seen that grow 21% over the same time last year. And so universities are back. People value IEEE's content. People are accessing IEEE publications. Just so far this year, we've published over 100,000 total conference papers on IEEE Explore. We're now accelerating those. Those aren't kind of conference papers from conferences last year being published this year. Over 54,000 of them are from conferences conducted already this year. So the time to publish from a meeting has been reduced significantly, so we can get cutting edge research out quickly to folks who can use it. There's been a lot of concern over time about open access and the shift in model in the publications business. IEEE has fully adopted open access. And we've been creating new open access venues as the model in scientific publishing has changed. Just this year, we've added 5 new transactions and journals, 3 of which are fully open access, and 2 of which are hybrid journals, which offer open access or subscription depending on author preference. And we're currently on track to launch 11 more new publications in emerging areas like machine learning here in the next 12 months. We're trying to make it easier for authors to publish with IEEE. Our author portal allows authors to engage with IEEE in a much simpler way and to take advantage of some of the new tools that we now offer. Tech Archive is the IEEE preprint server, and so even before peer review occurs on a paper, you can post it online, have it referenced by IEEE, get your research artifacts out into public, and then as it's peer reviewed and finally published, that life cycle is fully visible within these portals. It allows people to share research in new ways, faster and easier. If you haven't had a chance to look at IEEE Spectrum recently, the print copy you probably receive at home looks different. It went through a significant refresh earlier this year. I'm pretty excited by it. It makes it much more readable and much more, I think, interesting to visually. And we've also updated the IEEE website. If you haven't been on IEEEspectrum.org recently, spectrum.ieee.org recently, I encourage you to take a look. It's we've now made it a much more modern website. Both current and historic content is available. It integrates video and other features directly onto the page. And it now includes new opportunities for us to create member-only experiences so that IEEE members can dig deeper into articles or access other material that other viewers can't. We've seen just an enormous uptake of this website since it's launched. One of the features is that it's much faster and it works much better on mobile devices and tablets. Our Future Directions group is one of the ways that we shape the future of IEEE. Future Directions are investments in technology areas that don't fit into our existing technical societies, but that we see emerging. And so IEEE creates these Future Directions groups to organize conferences, potentially to arrange publications, to find places where members can meet and talk about topics that are on the cutting edge that don't necessarily fit into our existing societies. We've now created small groups, which are even lighter weight structures for exploring new technologies. These can be stood up quickly with small amount of resources. And we seed these to allow them to start to build a kind of international presence for IEEE in these areas. I'm excited about the list that was just turned on because I've actually worked in many of these, I think in all of these fields back in my technical history. New work looking at low Earth orbit satellites and the ability for small satellite constellations to deliver new capabilities. Opportunities for smart lighting to deliver more power efficient and more effective urban lighting, and telepresence, thinking beyond autonomy and remote control, but thinking about how we can start to control robots at distance, and think about the future of the play that will have for both industry and civilian applications. I mentioned education. One of the things that we launched this year was the Try Engineering STEM portal. Well, we did a survey a year ago simply looking at all of the activities across IEEE focused on K through 12 education. There was an enormous amount of effort, but very little coordination among them. And so this is a mechanism by which we can share best practices, connect activities around the world. And so folks don't have to reinvent things. They can look at what other chapters, sections, regions are doing and help to build a local engagement with STEM communities. And I encourage folks to take a look at the site. We've also been, to help seed this site, offered grants to groups around the world, IEEE groups that were doing STEM activities. And I note that among the awardees were groups from Region 1. And I think this is a great way to with a small amount of money, be able to capture and expand the scale and scope of our STEM work. One of the other things we've been doing on the education side, we saw an enormous demand as education went virtual during COVID, for a place that educators could come together to talk about how they could conduct engineering education in new ways, how they could make virtual labs, how they could better engage students remotely, how they could do assessments of students when they weren't physically present. And so we've created this Teaching Excellence Hub as a way to share educational techniques from professor to professor, from educator to educator, to think about things like technologies in the classroom, about application of cutting edge educational research. And there has been just an amazing and enormous pickup of the site. It really is, I think, meeting an important demand. If it's of interest to you, this is a joint effort between our Educational Activities Volunteer Group and the IEEE Education Society. We've just recently launched a platform for volunteering opportunities, and I encourage geo units, regions, societies to take advantage of this. This is a great way to advertise. If you have things that you want to do, to connect members to tasks. Traditionally, we've been focused on officer roles and nomination appointments, and people sign up for a long-term role. But there are many jobs in IEEE which are shorter term. I need help on something for a conference. I need somebody to help me test a website. This is ways to get people to engage in, if you will, micro-volunteering by advertising tasks to see if we can find volunteers who can fit that into their busy schedules. It's a way to kind of break up work and get more people engaged with the activities of IEEE. I was going to quickly mention a few things about IEEE USA. One of the big pieces of news coming out of Washington in the last few weeks has been this over $1 trillion infrastructure bill that passed the U.S. Senate back in early August. That bill has had IEEE USA has had remarkable influence on that bill. When you look at the language that's in that bill on electric vehicle infrastructure, on power grid updates, and on enhancing broadband, particularly for rural areas in America, you can see the influence of IEEE's white papers and of the direct questions that came to us to help explain technology and technology opportunity from staffers and members of Congress. And I think we often don't see the conversation that IEEE USA is engaged in with our legislators often is happening kind of behind the scenes, but it's very rare that you see this very clear connection between the work we've done and work that's going to impact probably every American, and particularly impact the engineering and research community. Also, IEEE USA has a series of upcoming meetings. If you're not familiar with the EVO conference series, these are free virtual online meetings focused on students and professionals in terms of engaging and improving your career. There's been a two-part session for students this year. The second part will occur on the 3rd of November. And on the 1st of September, EVO Pro, which is focused on practicing professionals, has a lineup of very interesting speakers. I encourage you to take a look at that conference online at the website link below. And then finally, I hope that everyone's had a chance to see these. These are 30-second advertisements that IEEE USA has been running on television stations around the country, on streaming services, and on other platforms, on cable news and other channels. These are short interstitials that talk about the impact that IEEE has had on individual careers. And I am very excited about these. I think this is a great way to engage people about IEEE. It's a very positive message. And this was done at very, very low cost. I'm not going to take the time to show it, but if there's one thing I'd encourage you to kind of click on, it's the link to these videos. Take a look at My Competitive Edge campaign, how IEEE offers individuals a competitive edge in their careers. IEEE Day is our day where we celebrate the founding of IEEE. It's 5th of October this year. One of the things we're focused on this year is trying to do more in the United States. This tends to be a big event in Latin America, in Europe, and Asia. It's not such a big deal in the US. It's difficult to kind of engage virtually, but we're encouraging folks to think about ways to engage and celebrate IEEE Day as a worldwide community. I am now wrapping up. We just recently published the IEEE annual reports. These include all the financial data and a summary of key events from across the year. It's a major effort and serves as a culmination and wrap up, both from a business perspective and from a member activity perspective of the year. I worked directly with President Fukuda in preparing this report, and it's available on the link here. And the IEEE Foundation also has just published their annual report of giving and work that the charitable activity of the IEEE Foundation conducts. All right, so this has been now a very strange 18 months, but I think that IEEE has managed to find its way in the complex environment of the pandemic. I think we've adopted technology to engage our members. I see enormous, in fact, kind of outstanding numbers on our virtual activities. So there's an appetite for engagement in IEEE activities. I recognize that this is getting old and we'd all like to see each other, but in person. But I think that given the constraints we have, I am very pleased with the enormous effort that's been done by volunteers, supported by IEEE staff around the world to keep IEEE relevant and active during this complex time. And I'm hoping that we're going to see an emergence from this pandemic here in the coming months. And I'm hoping that will be a time of refresh, reinvigoration, and re-energization across IEEE. So again, thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm sorry I ran a few minutes long, but I hope that this is of interest in terms of getting a sense of just a bigger scope of activities across IEEE. Again, I'm always available to anyone. I'm available by email, phone. I'm happy to answer any questions in chat today. And I don't know if we have any time for questions. I'll turn it back to Ed. Thanks.
Yeah, we will. I think it's important. If you have a question for Steve, let's make a little time for that. We don't get Steve every time, so we are actually quite pleased to have a bit of his time. So if you have any question from Steve, please do so now. Put it on the chat. And
Ed,
yes,
Kate Duncan has signed on. If you want to back up into her presentation.
yes. Well, she will come up. She will come on right after Steve. So questions for Steve? Well, seeing none.
That's great. Again, I'm always available to folks. Happy to follow up on anything, and I'll be here for the rest of the meeting. So thanks.
Stephen, thank you very much. We always feel that's very important for the larger IEEE and certainly my section officers to see the broadness and all the things that are happening and all the places they can go and all the resources we can have in our larger organization. So thank you very much.
Sorry, Steve, I do have one quick question. Yes. So the small groups that you mentioned, the 3 projects, the satellites and so on, is that engineers getting together and coming up with new technology?
Yes. So we're looking to find places where new and emerging technologies can find a home in IEEE. And so within those groups, folks who are working in those fields can now find each other. And so that's the real goal of these groups, is to provide an organizing mechanism for meetings, conferences, publications, for educational activities around these emerging topics. And so we've done this before, for example, in areas like green ICT. IEEE had a major focus area on emerging technologies around brain science, which significantly advanced the field, and major U.S. and international programs in that space. We have a volunteer committee that looks at emerging technologies, receives briefings and proposals, and these new areas were selected this year as emerging topics where there's strong community interest in convening.
Got it. That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have one from Bala, which says, how did the publication business buying and selling impact the large and newer IEEE publication business?
How did the buying and selling, I'm not sure I followed that.
Bala?
The buying and selling refers to the independent publication company that IEEE bought several years back and sold it about 2 years back.
Yeah.
So what was the thought process then, and what is the thought process now, and why is the current thought process more relevant or more to the context?
Right. We had, again, prior to my arrival at IEEE, we had, IEEE had purchased a for-profit company that was largely an advertising company with some hope of being able to grow that. Those hopes weren't realized. That company suffered significant losses over several years. And to avoid further losses to IEEE, we found we put that up on for auction. We found a buyer for that company, and IEEE closed last year on the sale of that investment. That limits any further losses, and it recovered some of the investment we'd made in it, and eliminated a large number of potential liabilities for IEEE. We made that sale at the very beginning of the pandemic, which turned out to be kind of a just perfect timing to get out of it. It would have been a real storm last year if we were still owning that company. I think it's a challenge the board to think harder about whether they'll make investments in the future in for-profit companies that might not be as aligned with IEEE's core activities. I can certainly say that we're not thinking about doing anything like that at the moment. Our core publication activities, though, I think are continuing to be enormously in demand. We're seeing a very strong appetite from consortiums, universities, companies around the world for IEEE's publication products. The death of the publication business has been predicted for some time, but it's that hasn't happened certainly in the last 12 months. We've seen very strong interest in what IEEE does, and it reflects the quality and I think the relevance of the work that IEEE publishes. We're an incredibly selective publisher. The acceptance rates at our least selective journals, we reject over 80% of what's offered to us. And so the things that actually make it into an IEEE publication are important, and I think that's reflected in the continued interest in what we do.
So thank you. I will take no more questions as we move on to